हॅलो, नमस्ते. आज आपण इयत्ता 9वीच्या गणित भाग 2 मधील मॅथमॅटिक्स पार्ट 2 मधील चॅप्टर नंबर 5 क्वाड्रिलॅटरल्स याच्यामध्ये काही भाग आपण अभ्यासणार आहे. या अगोदर काही आपण वर्गामध्ये अभ्यासलेला आहे. ते पॅरलोग्राम कुठल्या क्वाड्रिलॅटरला म्हणायचं, properties of parallelogram and test for parallelogram. There are 4 tests for parallelogram that are a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if its pairs of opposite angles are congruent. म्हणजे असा क्वाड्रिलॅटरल असेल की त्याच्या अपोजिट साईडच्या पेअर या कॉन्ग्रुएंट असतील तर तो क्वाड्रिलॅटरल हा पॅरलोग्राम असतो. इन अ क्वाड्रिलॅटरल इज अ पॅरलोग्राम इफ इट्स पेअर्स ऑफ अपोजिट साइड्स आर कॉन्ग्रुएंट. सेकंड टेस्ट, अ क्वाड्रिलॅटरल इज अ पॅरलोग्राम if its pairs of opposite angles are congruent. पहिली टेस्ट आहे, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if its opposite pairs of sides are congruent. Second test, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if its pairs of opposite angles are congruent. Third test, a quadrilateral is a parallelogram if its diagonals bisect each other. एखादा क्वाड्रिलॅटरल असा असेल की त्याचे डायगोनल हे एकमेकांना बायसेक्ट करत असतील तर तो क्वाड्रिलॅटरल हा पॅरलोग्राम असतो. दिस इज थर्ड टेस्ट. अँड फोर्थ टेस्ट इज अ क्वाड्रिलॅटरल इज अ पॅरलोग्राम इफ अ पेअर ऑफ इट्स अपोजिट साइड्स इज पॅरलल अँड कॉन्ग्रुएंट. म्हणजे एखादा क्वाड्रिलॅटरल असा असेल की त्याच्या अपोजिट साईडची एकच पेअर ही पॅरलल पण असेल आणि कॉन्ग्रुएंट पण असेल तर तो क्वाड्रिलॅटरल काय असतो, पॅरलोग्राम असतो. या टेस्ट आहेत आणि त्या आपण प्रूव्ह करून पाहिलेल्या आहेत. आता आपल्याला त्याच्यावरचे एक्झाम्पल्स अभ्यासाचे आहेत. सॉल्ड एक्झाम्पल्स पुस्तकामध्ये दिलेले आहेत. ती तुम्ही पाहिली तरी तुमच्या लक्षात येतील कारण ती सोडून दिलेली आहे. आता प्रॅक्टिस सेट 5.2 जो आहे त्याच्यामध्ये टोटल देर आर 5 एक्झाम्पल्स. आउट ऑफ दॅट थर्ड अँड फिफ्थ एक्झाम्पल इज नॉट फॉर आवर एक्झाम बट फर्स्ट, सेकंड अँड फोर्थ 3 examples are for the exam. Now let us study first example. In the figure, quadrilateral ABCD is a parallelogram. If suppose this is a parallelogram ABCD, names are like this, ABCD. P and Q are midpoints of AB, side AB and side BC respectively. That means midpoint of side AB is P. That means this is AP is congruent to PB. And midpoint of this CD is Q. Means this and this is congruent. Then AQ हे जोडलेले आणि PC हे जॉईन केले. पहा, in the figure quadrilateral ABCD is a parallelogram. P is a midpoint of side AB and Q is a midpoint of side CD BC. Then prove that quadrilateral APCQ this quadrilateral is a parallelogram. We know the test for parallelogram That is, in a quadrilateral, if one pair of opposite sides is parallel as well as congruent, then that quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Now see in this figure, quadrilateral ABCD is a parallelogram. That means side AB is parallel to side DC. These two sides are opposite sides of parallelogram. That means these two sides are parallel. If AB is parallel to DC, that means AP is parallel to QC. या साईडचाच हा एक भाग आहे आणि या साईडचाच हा एक भाग आहे, त्यामुळं हे याला पॅरलल असणार. AP is parallel to QC. Again see that AB is congruent to DC because opposite sides of parallelogram are congruent. That means AB is equal to DC. If we divide both sides by 2, we get AB upon 2 is equal to DC upon 2. So half of AB means AP because P is the midpoint of AB. That's why half of AB is AP. So this means AP is equal to half of DC means QC because Q is the midpoint of side DC. Therefore, AP is equal to QC. Now, see in this quadrilateral APCQ. AP is parallel to QC and AP is congruent to QC. Therefore, quadrilateral APCQ is a parallelogram. In this way, we can prove this. Now, second example, using opposite angles test for parallelogram, prove that every rectangle is a parallelogram. So what is a rectangle? A quadrilateral in which each angle is of 90 degree is called a rectangle. Now see, this is a rectangle because measure of this angle is 90 degree, measure of this angle is 90 degree, this angle is 90 degree, this angle is 90. If suppose this is a rectangle ABCD, now see, measure of angle A is 90 and measure of angle C is also 90. So that means angle A is congruent to angle C. That means angle BAD is congruent to angle BCD. That means opposite angles are congruent. Now see here, measure of angle B is 90 degree, measure of D is also 90 degree. That means opposite angles, angle B and angle D are congruent. So both pairs of opposite angles of this quadrilateral is congruent. Therefore, this is a parallelogram because in a quadrilateral, pairs of opposite angles are congruent, then it is a parallelogram. By using this property, we can prove that every rectangle is a parallelogram. Now, fourth example is there. You can solve that example easily. Prove that the quadrilateral formed by the intersection of angle bisectors of all angles of parallelogram is a rectangle. Now see here. If this is a parallelogram, if this is a angle bisector of this angle, this is angle bisector of this angle. This is angle bisector of and this is angle bisector of this. If suppose this is point P, this is point Q, this is R, this is S, and quadrilateral is A, B, C, D. Now see this figure. Quadrilateral ABCD is a parallelogram, and the quadrilateral formed by the intersection of angle bisectors of all angles of parallelogram is a rectangle. If this is a angle bisector of angle ADC, this is angle bisector of angle DAB. This is angle bisector. This is angle bisector. This QR is angle bisector of angle ABC, and these two angles are congruent. That means this is angle bisector. CP is angle bisector of BCD. So this quadrilateral is a parallelogram. This we have to prove this. See here, suppose measure of this angle is x and measure of this angle is y. That means measure of this angle is also x and measure of this angle is also y. Now see here, but we know that these two lines are parallel lines and this is their transversal. Now see here, CD and AB are parallel lines and BC is their transversal. Therefore, angle ABC and angle DCB, this is a pair of interior angles. Therefore, sum of measures of these two angles is 180. That means this total measure of this angle is 2x plus 2y. Measure of this angle total is equal to 180 degree, because this is a pair of interior angles when these two parallel lines are intersected by this line BC. So dividing by 2, we get x plus y is equal to 90 degree. Now see in this triangle BQC, sum of measures of these two angles is 90 degree. Therefore, measure of this angle is 90 degree. But if measure of this angle BQC is 90 degree, then measure of angle PQR is 90 degree. That means measure of this angle is 90 degree. Similarly, we can prove measure of this angle DAS and measure of angle ADS. Sum of measure of these two angles is 90 degree. Therefore, measure of this angle, third angle of this triangle is 90 degree. So if measure of this angle is 90 degree, then measure of this angle is also 90 degree, because these are vertically opposite angles. Now see in this quadrilateral, measure angle PSR is equal to 90 degree, measure angle PQR is equal to 90 degree. But these two lines are parallel. These two lines are parallel. Therefore, measure of this angle is equal to measure of this angle. Sum of these measures of these two angles is 180 degree. Therefore, measure of this angle is 90 degree. If measure of this is 90 degree, this is also 90 degree. So each angle of this quadrilateral PQRS is 90 degree. Therefore, this is a rectangle. PQRS is a rectangle. In this way, we can solve the examples given in practice set 5.2. Only 3 examples are there. So, we can solve this easily. Now, another part, that is properties of a rectangle, rhombus and square. Now, rectangle means each angle of quadrilateral is of 90 degree. That means all angles are congruent in a quadrilateral. Then that quadrilateral is called a rectangle. If a quadrilateral is a rectangle, then it is a parallelogram, because opposite angles, both pairs of opposite angles of rectangle are congruent. All angles are congruent. That means opposite angles are congruent. Opposite angles, pairs of opposite angles are congruent. Then that quadrilateral is called a parallelogram. That means a rectangle is a parallelogram. Square is also parallelogram. And third, rhombus. Rhombus means all sides are congruent. If in a quadrilateral all sides are congruent, then it is called a rhombus. If all sides are congruent, that means opposite pairs of quadrilateral, opposite sides, pairs of sides of quadrilateral are rhombus are congruent. That means it is a parallelogram. That means all rectangles are parallelogram, all squares are parallelogram, and all rhombus are parallelogram. So all the properties of parallelogram are in rectangle as well as square and rhombus. म्हणजे पॅरलोग्रामच्या ज्या ज्या प्रॉपर्टीज आहेत त्या सर्व प्रॉपर्टी ह्या स्क्वेअरमध्ये असतात, रेक्टँगलमध्ये असतात आणि रोम्बसमध्ये असतात. पण यांच्या जरी प्रॉपर्टीज पॅरलोग्राममधल्या सगळ्या असल्या तरी यांच्या अशा स्पेशल प्रॉपर्टीज वेगळ्या आहेत आणि त्या आपल्याला अभ्यासायच्या आहेत. त्यातली पहिली आहे रेक्टँगलच्या बाबतीत. रेक्टँगलमध्ये diagonals of rectangle are congruent. Diagonals of rectangle are congruent. Now see here, if this is a rectangle, means measure of this angle is 90 degree, measure of this angle is 90 degree, measure of this angle is 90 degree. All these angles are of 90 degree. We have to prove this diagonal and this diagonal are congruent. Now consider triangle ADC and BAD. In triangle ADC and triangle BAD. In triangle ADC आपल्याला प्रूव्ह काय करायचं आहे? AC is congruent to BD. In order to prove this, let us consider triangle ADC, that means this triangle, and BAD is this triangle. In these two triangles, side AD is common side. side AD is congruent to side AD. AD is a common side. Then side AB is या ट्रायंगलची DC side CD. Side DC is congruent to side AB because opposite sides of rectangle are congruent. ही साइड या साइडला कॉन्ग्रंट आहे, ही कॉमन साइड आहे आणि अँगल BAD that means measure of this angle ADC is equal to 90 degree and measure of angle BAD is also 90 degree. Therefore angle ADC is congruent to angle BAD. And reason काय असणार? Each of 90 degree. Therefore triangle ADC is congruent to triangle ADC is congruent to triangle ADC यातला 90चा D आणि BAD मधला 90चा A आहे, म्हणजे A मध्ये येणार पहिला अक्षर आपल्याला माहित नाही. आता AD is congruent to AD and CD is congruent to AB. Means B must be here and D must be here. As here. AD is congruent to DA, DC is congruent to AB, and AC is congruent to DB. Therefore, AC is congruent to DB. What is the reason? CSCT, congruent sides, corresponding sides of congruent triangles. But AC is a diagonal, one diagonal, and DB is another diagonal. So diagonals of rectangle are congruent. In this way, we can prove this property of a rectangle. This is special property of a rectangle. Diagonals of rectangle are congruent. In square, there is another property, that is diagonals of a square are congruent. Square means a quadrilateral in which all sides are congruent and all angles are congruent. If all angles are congruent, then it is a rectangle. So diagonals of rectangle are congruent. That means diagonals of square is congruent. Square is a rectangle. So property of a rectangle is a property of a square. So diagonals of a rectangle are congruent. Therefore diagonals of square is also congruent. Then diagonals of a rhombus are perpendicular bisectors of each other. पहा, रेक्टँगल, स्क्वेअर आणि रोम्बस हे तीनही काय असतात? पॅरलोग्राम असतात. त्यामुळे पॅरलोग्रामच्या प्रॉपर्टीज ज्या आहेत त्या सर्व रेक्टँगल, स्क्वेअर आणि रोम्बसमध्ये असतात. पण त्याच्या व्यतिरिक्त आणखी स्पेशल प्रॉपर्टीज या रेक्टँगल, स्क्वेअर आणि रोम्बसमध्ये असतात. पण आपण पाहिलं की रेक्टँगलमध्ये काय विशेष प्रॉपर्टी आहे की जी पॅरलोग्रामची नाही. काय प्रॉपर्टी आहे? डायगोनल्स ऑफ रेक्टँगल आर कॉन्ग्रंट. रेक्टँगलचे डायगोनल कॉन्ग्रंट असतात. ही प्रॉपर्टी रेक्टँगलची आहे की जी पॅरलोग्राममध्ये नसते. समजलंय? तसेच square is a rectangle, therefore all properties of rectangle are in the square. So if diagonals of rectangle are congruent, that means diagonals of square are also congruent. Now in a rhombus there is special property for rhombus, that is diagonals of rhombus are perpendicular bisectors of each other. If this is a rhombus, rhombus means all sides are congruent. This side is congruent to this side, is congruent to this side, and is congruent to this side. All these four sides are congruent. That is called a rhombus. So A, B, C, D. This is a rhombus because AB is congruent to BC, is congruent to DC, is congruent to AD. We have to prove diagonals of rhombus are perpendicular bisectors of each other. Perpendicular means this measure of this angle is 90 degree. This is also 90 degree. This is 90 degree. This is 90 degree. And perpendicular bisectors means this. If this is a point M, then AM is congruent to CM, and BM is congruent to DM. This we have to prove. Now see here. This B point and D point are equidistant from point B is equidistant from endpoints of the segment AC. That means AB is congruent to BC because these are the sides of a rhombus. If each point which is equidistant from the endpoints of a segment lie on the perpendicular bisector of that segment. Now see here, this is segment AC and point B is equidistant from A and point C. Point A and point C. Therefore, B lies on perpendicular bisector of segment AC. Like that, D is also equidistant from point A and point C of the segment AC. That means D lies on perpendicular bisector of segment AC. That means if point B and point D are these 2 points lie on the perpendicular bisector of segment AC, that means BD is a perpendicular bisector of AC. Similarly, we can prove that AC is a perpendicular bisector of BD. That means diagonals of rhombus are perpendicular bisectors of each other. In this way, we can prove this. Now, what we have to remember, diagonals of rectangle are congruent. Remember this, diagonals of rectangle are congruent. Secondly, diagonals of a square are congruent. Then diagonals of rhombus are perpendicular bisectors of each other. The diagonals of rhombus bisect the pairs of opposite angles. Diagonals of rhombus bisect the pairs of opposite angles. म्हणजे हा अँगल आहे बी आणि हा अँगल आहे डी, याचा आणि या अँगलचा हा डायगोनल परपेंडिक्युलर बायसेक्टर असतो. म्हणजे या अँगलला हा डायगोनल बायसेक्ट करतो, त्याचप्रमाणे या अँगलला हा डायगोनल बायसेक्ट करतो. म्हणजे डायगोनल्स ऑफ रोम्बस बायसेक्ट द पेअर्स ऑफ अपोजिट अँगल्स. म्हणजे हा एक आणि हा एक अपोजिट अँगल्स आहे. तर हा डायगोनल काय करतोय, या अँगलला पण बायसेक्ट करतो आणि या अँगलला पण बायसेक्ट करतो. त्याचप्रमाणे हा अँगल डी आणि हा अँगल बी टोटल, तर हे अपोजिट अँगल्स आहेत ह्याचे रोम्बेसचे. म्हणजे हा जो डायगोनल आहे बी डी, तो काय करतो, बी अँगलला म्हणजे ए बी सी आणि ए डी सी या दोन्ही अँगलला बायसेक्ट करतो. सो diagonals of rhombus bisect the pairs of opposite angles. The diagonals of a square are perpendicular bisectors of each other. A rhombus, means square is a rhombus, therefore if the diagonals of a rhombus are perpendicular bisectors of each other, that means diagonals of square are perpendicular bisectors of each other. Then another property, The diagonals of a square bisect opposite angles. रोम्बसच्या ज्या प्रॉपर्टीज आहेत त्या स्क्वेअरमध्ये येणार आपोआप, कारण स्क्वेअरच्या सर्व साईड कॉन्ग्रंट असतात, तसंच रोम्बसच्या सर्व साईड कॉन्ग्रंट असतात. म्हणजे रोम्बसच्या प्रॉपर्टी स्क्वेअरमध्ये येणार, रेक्टँगलच्या स्क्वेअरमध्ये येणार. म्हणजे सर्व जे टाईप्स ऑफ क्वाड्रिलॅटरल्स आहेत त्या सर्वांच्या प्रॉपर्टीज या स्क्वेअरमध्ये येणार, कारण स्क्वेअरच्या ऑल साईड्स कॉन्ग्रंट असतात आणि ऑल अँगल्स कॉन्ग्रंट असतात, त्याला स्क्वेअर आपण म्हणतो. आता प्रॅक्टिस सेट 5.3 त्याच्यामध्ये फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, डायगोनल्स ऑफ रेक्टँगल ABCD इंटरसेक्ट ॲट पॉईंट O. रेक्टँगल आहे आणि त्याचे डायगोनल, त्या रेक्टँगलचं नाव आहे ABCD. आता पहा, हा ABCD हा रेक्टँगल आहे आणि त्याचे डायगोनल्स AC आणि BD हे O मध्ये इंटरसेक्ट होतात. पहा, diagonals of rectangle ABCD intersect at point O if AC is equal to 8, AC total, AC is equal to 8, then find BO. We know that rectangles, in a rectangle, diagonals of rectangle are congruent. If AC is equal to 8, then BD is also 8, and diagonals of rectangle bisect each other. That means BO is congruent to OD and AO is congruent to OC. BD is congruent to AC. Therefore, BO is equal to 4, half of BD, that means half of AC. And if angle CAD is equal to 35, CAD, measure of this angle is 35 degree. Then find angle ACB. Find angle ACB. Measure of this angle is also 35 degree, because this BC and AD are parallel lines and AC is their transversal. Therefore, this is a pair of alternate angles. If lines are parallel, then alternate angles are congruent. Therefore, measure angle ACB is equal to 35. In a rhombus PQRS, rhombus है, then all sides are congruent. Rhombus. Suppose rhombus is like this. Name of this is PQRS. PQRS. If PQ is equal to 7.5, PQ side. Find QR. What is the length of QR? It is also 7.5. This is also 7.5. This is also 7.5. Because all sides of rhombus are congruent. Very easy. If angle QPS is equal to 75, if angle QPS is equal to 75, आता हे आपल्याला नाव बदलावं लागेल. PQRS. QPS is equal to 75 degree. Then find the measures of angle PQR and angle SRQ. Measure of angle SRQ is 75, because opposite angles of rhombus are congruent. Now see here, this line is parallel to this line and this is their transversal. That means these two angles are interior angles, and interior angles of pair of interior angles are supplementary if these lines are parallel. That means measure of this angle is 180 minus 75, that is 105 degree. Measure of angle SRQ is equal to 75 degree. and measure angle PQR is equal to 105 degree. Diagonals of a square IJKL square है, त्याचं नाव आहे IJKL square intersects at point M. Find the measure of angle IMJ. Square. Square means all sides are congruent and all angles are congruent. That means like this. All sides are congruent and all angles are congruent. That means of 90 degree. Name of this is IJKL. And diagonals of these two diagonals intersect in M. Here there is M. Now find the measure of angle IMJ. IMJ. What is the measure of this angle? Is 90 degree. Because diagonals of square are perpendicular bisectors of each other. Perpendicular means measure of this angle is 90 degree. Then angle JIK means measure of this angle. This is a bisector of this angle. Measure of this angle is 90 degree. Therefore, measure of this IJK is 45 degree. Measure of angle LJK. This is also 45 degree. Because this diagonal is bisector of this angle. Measure of this angle is 90 degree. Therefore, half of that is 45 degree. In this way, we can calculate the values. State with reason whether the following statements are true or false. Every parallelogram is a rhombus. False. Because in parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent, not all sides are congruent. If all sides are congruent, then that quadrilateral is a rhombus. Therefore, this sentence is false. Every rhombus is a rectangle. This is also false because in a rhombus there is no need of measure of each angle is 90 degree. So if measure of each angle in a quadrilateral is 90 degree, then that quadrilateral is a rectangle, otherwise no. So this statement, that is every rhombus is a rectangle, this is false. Every rectangle is a parallelogram, this is true. Every square is a rectangle, it is also true because measure of each angle of a square is 90 degree. Every square is a rhombus. This is also true because in a square all sides are congruent. And if in a quadrilateral all sides are congruent, then it is called a rhombus. Every parallelogram is a rectangle. It is false. So in this way we can solve practice set 5.3.